I'm Jesse Yost with CommScope Ruckus. Today we're going to discuss switch troubleshooting in Ruckus Cloud. We're also going to take a look at adding an existing device into our Ruckus Cloud to be managed without deleting the existing configuration. Here we are back again in the Ruckus Cloud instance. Today we're going to talk about switches and switch configurations. We're going to take a look at some of the options available to you in the Ruckus Cloud in terms of switch troubleshooting. So things that you can look at, configurations you can compare. You can get in there and take a look at some of the history on the configuration as well. But I wanted to take a look first, before we jump into that, I wanted to take a look at adding a switch that already has existing configurations into the Ruckus Cloud. So we know that we can add a greenfield switch into the Ruckus Cloud and onboard it that way, but I have another switch in my environment that already has some configuration that I want to look to add. So let's go over to networking devices, and we can see here that we've got the existing switch that was originally greenfield, a brand new switch when we brought this in, but I have another switch here. So if I bring this this putty window over, we can kind of just take a look at the configuration of this switch and know that it is not default. We do have a lag configured. We do have some inline power options configured, as well as user accounts and host names. I mean, just very basic stuff, but definitely not default configurations. So what I want to do is I want to bring this one into the Ruckus Cloud. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that we meet the minimum firmware requirements. So 8095BA does meet the minimum firmware requirement. We also need to make sure that this model is supported in the cloud, and it is in 7150C12. So this one definitely is. So if you're looking to add a switch into the cloud, those are the first two things. You need to make sure it's supported, make sure you're on the right firmware. Then I'm going to just kind of make sure from a connection standpoint that, you know, I'm going to be okay once I get this thing running. So I'm going to just try to ping a DNS name, and I can see that I'm good here. One thing I didn't see in the configuration for my switch was the manager registrar. So I have the manager port list, but I don't have that manager registrar command. I'm going to go ahead and just add that into the switch right now. There we go. Okay, so now we've got that in here. We can see that that's now part of our config, and I am going to just save the configuration. I also need to grab, I guess I need to grab the serial number of this device as well. So let me do that so I can easily add it into the cloud configuration. So, all right, I've got the serial number. Now let's go over to back into the cloud and add this switch. I'm just going to paste the serial number in here, and we're getting the notification, hey, you got to meet the minimum firmware requirement. Make sure that you know you're doing that. And it is a standalone switch, and this one is ICX 7150, sorry, C20. So once I've got all that added here, let me go ahead, and I don't know why this is kind of hidden from me here, but I'm going to click, this is the save button. I'm not sure why this is kind of looking like this, but we're going to click save to add it in. And we can see now that we have this never contacted cloud. So let's, I'm going to bring over a ping that I'm running to this switch. So what I'm really trying to find out here is, if I'm going to lose connectivity on this switch, what kind of connectivity am I going to lose for this process? So I'm going to let this run. We'll jump back into this switch, and we'll take a look at kind of what happened post onboarding. We'll look at the configuration. We'll look at the firmware. We'll see what everything is doing, and see how much we lost, if any, when it comes to downtime. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna mute myself, and then we'll probably speed this up, and we'll take a look as soon as it's done. So we are back. I'm going to go ahead and stop my ping, and I'm going to go and try to figure out how long exactly it was that we were offline. So basically what you saw happen was we made initial contact with the cloud, and then we went into an initializing process, and then we did a firmware update and rebooted. So we started the reboot at 10:24, and it looks like we were done with the reboot at 10:31. So we had about 6 minutes of downtime there while the switch rebooted. So if you're going to do this process, just be aware that a firmware upgrade may be necessary, and it may reboot you if it does do that. I think we might have been able to avoid a reboot if we were to have completed a firmware update prior that would have kept us at the same version. So I was at 8095BA. Let's go and check and see what we're at now actually. So if I go into this switch, I'm just actually going to get in through the CLI session here so I don't have to enter in the password, and I'm going to just look at show version, and it looks like we are now running 8095CA. So we are now running 8095CA software. So that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and check out the running configuration as well to make sure all of the configuration that I had previously is still there. So I still have this lag connection. It looks like my static IP addressing is still configured. My inline power is still configured. I do have a username configured. It filled out the rest of the manager registrar configuration, and then again my port configurations for port names and stuff are there as well. So yeah, if you want to bring in your existing switches into the infrastructure without erasing them in the current instances of Ruckus Cloud, you can do that. Again, just as a recap, you got to make sure the switch model is supported as well as the firmware version is met before doing it, but it will pull in your configuration, and if it does have to do a firmware update, you will hit downtime while that restarts. Now that the switches are added into the cloud, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the information that we can learn about these switches once they are being managed. I'm going to click on the blue hyperlink for this switch, and we are taken right to the overview tab, which gives us a really good visual indicator of the overall health and use of this switch. So we can see out of 16 ports, we are using 4 ports. We can see that there are 7 clients connected. We see a PoE budget percentage for this device, and if there were any alarms that were showing up here, they would be represented on this top bar. Below that, we can see a panel view of our device. So the green squares indicate these are ports are in use, and we can see the little power icons for those ports as well. So if we hover over those, we can tell which ones are PoE. We can see how much PoE they are using versus configured. We can also see untagged and tagged VLAN information. So we can see that VLAN 1 is untagged for this port and VLAN 60 is tagged. So you can get some great information through there. A little further down, we can see overall switch status, switch traffic, as well as hardware, CPU, and memory utilization for the device. So we can see this in 24 hours, 7 days, or 30 days. And right now, everything is looking great on this particular device, but this is a good overview to see if there are any issues. Scrolling back up, we can switch views as well. We can switch over to the port view, and again, we can obtain that information on PoE usage. So you can hover over the panel, or you can look at this ports breakdown, and again, you can see VLANs as well as connected neighbors that are discovered via LLDP, so we can see what those are. If we look over at routed interfaces, we can get a list of the VEs for this particular device. So you can see that I do have a VE60 here. We see the address of that. We can also add additional VEs based on VLANs that already exist. So if I click on add VE interface, we are able to specify a VLAN ID here, and we can see that VLAN 60 is grayed out because we've already used that, but we do have VLAN 40 and VLAN 100 on this switch, so we could create a VE interface for either one of those VLANs through this configuration context. Moving along though, we also have VLANs and ACLs. So we can click on VLANs and see what the configuration for our VLANs currently looks like on this device. We cannot create VLANs from this view, nor can we create ACLs from this view. That would be done through the switch configuration profile and then applied to the venue. So the device lives under the venue. So if you wanted to actually add VLANs and ACLs, you would do it through the switch configuration profile, or you would do it through the CLI session. So under more actions, you can look at the CLI session for the actual switch, and it would be bringing you right in there so you can do the configuration changes as you need to. The next thing that we would want to discuss would be configuration management. So if we click up on the configuration management tab, we can look at all of the backups for this particular device. So there are auto backups that occur every day that we can take a look at, or we could even restore from. So if we select one of these, we would have the ability to restore one of these backups. We can of course view them, but another cool thing is that we can compare these two particular backups, or any two backups, to see what changes are different between each of these configurations. So I've got the autos and I've created a manual. I'm selecting the two that I want to compare, then I'm going to go ahead and click compare, and you can see our manual configuration backup was done on the right, and if we can scroll down, we see that the difference between these two configurations is highlighted in yellow there. We've got VLAN 100 configured to be tagged on port 6 and 7, so it's doing a quick file compare for changes and differences between the configs. Really cool, so you don't have to use a Notepad++ text plugin to do that compare. You can do it right from the GUI here. You also have the ability to see the configuration history on this device. So if we click up on the history tab, we can see the changes that were made based on the timestamp. So we can see that there are some that are listed as no config change, some that are listed as success. If we click on the blue hyperlink, we can see the details of that configuration. So we can see that it created a VLAN 40 named security for this particular configuration change today. So if you're wondering, what the timeline of changes were, you can see that information through here as well. That's all we have the time for on this one. Hopefully this gives you guys an idea on how and what to expect when adding brownfield switches to your Ruckus Cloud environment, and then overall gives you an idea of what you can look at once your device is managed with Ruckus Cloud.